In search of brighter days, I ride through the maze of the madness. Struggle is my address with pain and crack lips. Gunshots coming from sounds of blackness. Given this game with no time to practice. Born on a blacklist, told I'm below average. A life with no cabbage. That's no money if you from where I'm from. Funny, I just want some of your son. Dark clouds seem to follow me. Alcohol that my pop swallow bottle me. No apology, I walk with a bolt on my shoulder. It's a cold war, I'm a colder soldier. Hold the same fight that made Martin Luther the king. I ain't using it for the right thing. In between lean and the fiends, hustle and the schemes, I put together pieces of a dream. I still have one. I got a dream. One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. I have a dream. I got a dream. One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. I have a dream. I got a dream. That one day. That one day. I'ma look deeper than myself. I gotta find a way. I have a dream. My dream is to be free. My dream is to be. My dream is to be. My dream is to be free. The world see me looking in the mirror. Images of me getting much clearer. Dear self, I wrote a letter just to better my soul. If I don't express it, then forever I hold inside. I'm from a side where we out of control. Rap music in the hood play the fatherly role. My story like yours, yo, gotta be told. Trying to make it from a gangster to a Galia role. Red scrolls and stone slaves, and Jewish people in cold cage. Hate has no color or age. Flip the page. Now my race became freedom. Write dreams in the dark, they far, but I can see them. I believe in heaven more than hell. Blessings more than jail. In the ghetto, let love prevail. With a story to tell. My eyes see the glory and well. The world waiting for me to yell. I have a dream. I got a dream. One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. I have a dream. I got a dream. One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. One day we gonna work it out. I have a dream. I got a dream. That one day. That one day. I'll look deeper than myself. I gotta find a way. I have a dream. My dream is to be free. My dream is to be. My dream is to be. My dream is to be free.
Hello, everyone. This is Galen with the Town of Carrboro, and we welcome you to the 2021 Dr. Martin Luther King Youth-Led Special Event. We are thrilled to have you here. This was going to be an in-person event at the Century Center, and our fantastic youth groups decided to make this safe for everyone and take this event online in super short notice and do a great job. So we're happy to have the Chapel Hill Carrboro NAACP, the Carrboro Youth Council, and the Youth Advisory Board put together this event for all you today. I want to introduce our moderator for the event, Kendall Lytle. She has been instrumental over the past couple years, helping get these events going and done a great job. So I will turn this over to Kendall.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Kendall Lytle. I am the president of the Chapel Hill Carrboro NAACP Youth Council, as well as an active member of the Carrboro Youth Advisory Board. And I would like to welcome you all to the 2022 Dr. King Youth-Led Special Event. We hope that this program will remind us all of the legacy that Dr. King left and the importance of continued work for social justice. I would like to thank and welcome our esteemed guest, Senator Valerie Foushee. Senator Foushee is a lifelong resident of Orange County and a 1974 graduate of Chapel Hill High School. She is a graduate of the University of Chapel Hill in North Carolina, where she received a bachelor's in arts degree in political science and African and Afro-American studies. Valerie retired from the Chapel Hill Police Department after 21 years of service. There, she supervised 2 units and administered a $11 million budget. Foushee was elected to the Board of Education for Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools in 1997 and re-elected to her second term in 2001. She served as chair from 2001 to 2003. In November of 2004, she became the first African-American female elected to the Orange County Board of Commissioners. She was reelected in November of 2008 and served as a chair from 2008 to 2010. In 2012, Valerie was elected to the NC General Assembly to represent District 50, Orange and Durham counties. She was appointed to the Senate in 2013 to represent Orange and Chatham counties following her resignation of Senator Kennard. She was elected to the Senate in 2014 and reelected in 2016, 2018, and 2020. Senator Foushee is the chair of the NC State Democratic Caucus, the NC director for the National Foundation of Women Legislators, as well as the chair of the North Carolina Black Alliance. Valerie is married to Stan Foushee, a retired fire marshal for the town of Carrboro, and they have two sons, Stanley II and Terrence, and one grandson, Stanley III. Welcome, Senator Foushee.
Thank you, Kendall, and good afternoon to everyone. It is indeed a privilege to be with you as we celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I am grateful to the Town of Carrboro Youth Advisory Board and the Chapel Hill Carrboro NAACP Youth Council for choosing me for this opportunity. Every year, when we prepare for these celebrations, we are compelled to reflect on the turbulent times from which Dr. King emerged as a prophet and a leader. We take the time to watch videos or read his speeches, and we are awestruck by how dynamic, prolific, and courageous that he really was. Certainly, I am aware that his tireless efforts paved the way for me and so many others to be a part of this decision-making processes across this country. Some of us remember how we heeded the call to action because of the urgency of the times and what was at stake for so many Americans. If we look back, we can recall scenes on television and newspaper photos of law enforcement officers with attack dogs and fire hoses. And over the last several years, we have been able to witness somewhat a deja vu of those turbulent times of race relations in this country. There are no fire hoses or attack dogs, but there are all too frequently scenes of law enforcement officers killing unarmed Black men and women in the streets and even in their homes. Income inequality, gentrification, lack of access to affordable health care, quality education, and information by way of lack of broadband connectivity, and inflation, all exacerbated by a persistent deadly virus, are issues of today. In 1963, Dr. King shared his vision for a more just America in what we know as his I Have a Dream speech. He was the leader that spoke truth to power in a way that admonished us to be vigilant in our quest to achieve freedom and equality. He inspired us with the hope of reaching that proverbial promised land, the land of the free, where justice rolls down like a river and righteousness like a mighty stream. Now here in 2022, in an unprecedented era in American history, it is evident that we cannot hope to preserve Dr. King's legacy and his dream without another fight. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy. We must protect the right to vote and ensure that every legal vote counts. You don't need me to remind you that just over a year ago, an angry mob attacked the seat of our democracy in a vile attempt to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. If we as American citizens do not stand up and demand protection of our constitutional rights, then we have no one to blame but ourselves when we find that these rights are being taken away. Human progress, Dr. King noted, is neither automatic or inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. the tireless exertions and passionate concerns of dedicated individuals. If we are to realize our full potential as a democratic society, then it is up to every one of us to dedicate ourselves to its progress and preservation. We must resist and we must persist. Dr. King said, anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. That grace and love have to be generated and nurtured. We must nurture this vision of what our country could be so that future generations can reach their full potential. Our celebration and commemoration are not just about a dream. It's not just about a speech. It is about the essence of the speech, the hope and the promise of the dream. We have come so far, but it is crystal clear that we have to keep pushing forward. Dr. King's moment in time and the movement that he led didn't start with him, and his dream was that it would not end with him. He was one chapter of this story. The book is not finished yet. He understood that his dream for this country would not really come true in his lifetime. In fact, in his final speech in Memphis, he told us that he had been to the mountaintop. He said, I have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. He knew that it would take generations dedicated to pushing back against the status quo and always asking how we can do better as a society. We need to do more than just remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We need to honor him by continuing his work. That is the only way to truly keep the legacy alive. He said shortly before his death that life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? That all labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence. He said, anybody can serve. Remember that. So I would say to you today, now is the time for us to get into good trouble. Let's get into it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Fushi, for all those amazing words, and thank you for everything you already do for us in Orange County and Durham counties. Now I will introduce our guest panelists. After I introduce you, please take a few minutes to tell us about yourselves. And make sure you also unmute your mic. So yeah, I will start with Naya Farrington. So Naya is a senior nursing major at Howard University with a political science minor. She is a native of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where she graduated from Carrboro High School in 2018 and served as the first African-American student body president. Naya is passionate about advocating for her community and advocating for Black women. She obtained her Bachelor's of Science. After obtaining her Bachelor's of Science in nursing, she plans to attain a Master's in public health to assist marginalized communities and women of color with adequate health care and legislation that will decrease medical inequalities. Naya is an organizer in many settings through including the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People and Revolt Inc. She believes that the power of the future is within the mobilization of her generation. Her favorite quote is of Angela Davis, which says, "I am no longer accepting the things that I cannot change. I am changing the things that I can accept." Naya is known for her persistence, commitment, allyship, and hard work. And she knows that these things will continue to fulfill the words that Angela Davis has said. She aims to return to her community to be a servant leader and continue this work. I'm introduce Naya Farrington.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's truly my pleasure to be here this afternoon with you all for this celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I just want to again thank the NAACP Youth Council, who I'm always fortunate and glad to work with, as well as Kendall. The work you do is absolutely incredible. So I hope that everything that you're doing, somebody is telling you about the great work and that you continue to do that work. Also, Senator Fashie, thank you for that introduction as well. So many of the things that you said resonated with the work that I do, the work that I hope to do, and the work that I think all of us should plan to do in the future as well. So I'm really excited to be here today and excited to get into conversation with the other panelists. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for that, Naya. And now I will introduce our second panelist, Atreus Good. Atreus currently serves as the inaugural president and CEO of Mentor North Carolina, a statewide affiliation of Mentor, the National Mentoring and Partnership. In this role, he is a lead team member that is working to increase the number of youth and quality mentoring relationships across North Carolina, while working to address the systematic barriers that young people face on a daily basis. This includes cross-sector strategic engagement to elevate mentoring programs across the state, tracking external impact measurements, and providing the link between Mentor's national efforts, including public awareness and advocacy through national campaigns such as In Real Life, Coaches Challenge, NBA Cares, and National Mentoring Month.
Greetings. Thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to be here. I see a lot of familiar faces, so I'm glad to have had the opportunity to be here. I think a number of quotes from Dr. King that resonate with me have already been said, and I think that one that stands out for me is this notion of we're not makers of history, we're made by history. There are so many challenges that we've had to navigate as people, and I say in particular Black and brown folks, that we have overcome so many different types of things, and we still continue to have to navigate some of these barriers today. But I think the most important thing is to cling on to hope, that each and every one of us, we were born with what it is that we need to make a difference in society. The question is, how do we leverage that in such a way that we can create better pathways for people to move forward and truly achieve the types of things that Dr. King was looking for us to do? And so very much looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Atreus, and thank you again to all of our panelists. We will now watch a segment of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous speech during the March on Washington in 1963 and follow with a brief discussion.
A great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children be able to sing with new meaning, my country tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. And therefore you need not be lured
Thank you so much for that. We will start with the questions. So the first question I have is for the both of you. So it is, how do you feel the dream? How do you feel your dream and Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream correlate?
So I think one of the main things that always resonated with me in the dream is that there's always an idea or aspiration behind it. So it's not that we necessarily know or have a tangible idea of what we want, but we're able to visualize what it is that we hope to see. I think one of the main things that always comes to my mind when we talk about the I Have a Dream speech is how that wasn't even his intentions that day to talk about the dream. It was the voice of Mahalia Jackson telling him to tell America about the dream. So I think that really just resonates with how not always do we have an idea of what we want, but there are people behind us and people in our community that can support, but also they too know what we need to see. So if it wasn't for Mahalia Jackson, a lot of us wouldn't know about this dream. So in the same way that I operate in my community or aim to do the work is with the help of others around me to see the same dreams and also help me to push forward and working towards those things, whether that's closing the achievement gap or healthcare reform. I think that it really comes from the support of other people able to work together and mobilize to help you with those dreams.
Well, I guess I would say for me, and I was, as I was listening to the speech, it starts out this notion of 100 years later that Black folks are still navigating challenges. And I think that it's difficult that we consider where we are right now in 2022, that we are still dealing with the irksome stains of racism. And I think that in the midst of COVID-19, there are several things that have come up that we already knew existed, but have been exacerbated by these challenges. And so I think the thing that continues to come up to me is what is it going to take for us to move forward and finally be able to create a space where all people can thrive? And that lands on us being able to acknowledge history, where we came from, but setting up spaces that we can move forward. And so I think that where I would say my dreams may align with Dr. King's, this notion of hope, that I am very clear and aware of the history of this country. I'm sure that Dr. King was very aware, clear, had a capable understanding of what it was we were dealing with. And I think about everything that he had to navigate and still not see his dream accomplished, but still push forward. I mean, being imprisoned over 30 times, folks, many of which don't know that he was close to assassination a decade before, he was actually assassinated, and he was willing to put his life on the line for a dream that he wasn't sure whether he would actually see. So Senator Foushee talked about this notion of, being to the mountaintop and not knowing whether or not he was going to see what the dream was, but it was still this dedication to move forward, to still do that work. And so I'd say for me, I fully acknowledge where it is we are as a society, recognizing there's some significant challenges and being willing to put one foot in front of the other, not knowing whether or not my efforts are going to lead to some sort of change, but recognizing that there's still a responsibility that I have to do so. And I think that each and every one of us needs to have that level of hope in the midst of the abyss, recognizing that our efforts will lead us to some pathway someday, but we all have to make sure that we're not succumbing to the greater forces that make us believe that we can't see some sort of meaningful change.
Thank you so much for that, Atreus. I will go to the next question, which is, how has Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream helped motivate you into following your own dreams regarding social justice? Naya, I will start with you again.
I think one of the main things that I always think about when it comes to Dr. Martin Luther King is the quote, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that really reminds me of the intersectionality that the late Bell Hooks talked about. And I think that when we talk about the work and the legacy of Dr. King, we have to be committed to what we do. So I think just knowing that There is effort that has to be put in, but it's across the board and it comes from all people. It's just really important to me. And when it comes to the work that I'm trying to do, always being willing to reach out to other people, but also knowing that there's other issues always going on that affect what you're working on as well. So it's not always just one topic or one end goal, but all of these things work together or can have an effect on each other. So again, that intersectionality piece has been extremely important in me navigating this work.
So I would say that, one thing that comes up for me is this notion that I'm not anti anybody, but I'm unapologetically pro-Black, that there have been some things that Black people have had to navigate. And we need to recognize just the inherent giftedness that comes with us being able to have navigated through so many different things. A lot of people may forget that Dr. King, he entered college at 15. He was so gifted, just overflowing with talent, and really was able to rise to a space in which he led this national movement. And I think that Black folks in particular need to understand there's a rich history that's behind us that we need to be able to cling to and figure out the ways in which we leverage that to move forward and create some different spaces for us. And I think that that's in the midst of a society that beats us down every single day, tells us we're not capable, we're not competent, we're not talented. This notion around the opportunity gap and things that we don't have, we didn't come from that. And so I think that if you lean on this fact that we are inherently gifted, we're talented. A good friend of mine, Dr. William Jackson, leads an organization called Village of Wisdom. He has a very powerful notion of Black genius. Being able to lean on that helps us to understand that there's an inherent greatness in being able to move forward in the spite of adversity, to create spaces that maybe we have not even imagined yet. In the richest country in the world, we have some of the greatest levels of inequality, poverty, things of that nature. And I'd say that we have everything we need right now. If we wanted everybody to live the best lives possible, if we wanted people to thrive, what does it take for us to get there? And how do we create the collective will to do what's right? Because, being able to move forward and do what's right is not just a benefit for Black people, it's for all people, that we can all move forward and thrive in the ways in which Dr. King was mentioning.
Thank you so much for that. I will give you guys our third question for this video that we just watched. So it is, can we plan to ensure that the next generation is aware of the legacy that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders have left us? So I want to start with you, Atreus, because as a former youth member of one of your organizations, I feel like I've been able to learn from you, and I want to know how you can bring this generation, my generation, the legacy of Dr. King and other youth, other civil rights leaders to us as people in those organizations, and even like your amazing daughter that I had the opportunity to meet. So how do you believe you can bring that to people my age and people her age and beyond? So, yeah.
Well, I think, and I certainly don't want to feel like I'm the elder, but I would say, I think it takes adults and older folks getting out of the way and recognizing. And I think one of the most powerful things that I remember is that the civil rights movement, that was primarily led by young people. If you think about the bus boycotts and things of that nature, or even Claudette Colvin, who a lot of people don't recognize, who a month before Rosa Parks refused her seat, Claudette Colvin, she sat down and she refused to give up her seat. And because she didn't have the particular image that the NAACP wanted at that time, Rosa Parks then recreated that a month later. So young people truly have always led this movement. And so I think it's contingent upon me and folks that have more experience to figure out what are the ways in which we can create pathways for young people to access the power that they inherently have. I was in a session a couple of weeks ago that really focused on reclaiming what we have at birth. So we come into this world with everything we need. We're whole, we're smart. And then what happens after we're born, we're harmed. We're harmed by society. Sometimes we might be harmed by our families. And then we have to figure out, how do we get back to that which we already had? And so for me, I think that even as a father, what I've been trying to do is figure out, how do I create a space for my daughter to show up as she is unapologetically, recognizing that, as a Black girl who will then become a Black woman, she's going to get beat down by society. She has a very big personality. And I know that a lot of women, in particular Black women, are told to not speak up. To humble yourself, to not show up in your fullness. And so how do I nurture a daughter who I know already has characteristics society sees as threatening? What does that look like? How do I help her maintain her self-confidence when she goes to middle school? I mean, there are several things that I think that I'm having to think through. And so for me, I try to figure out, how do I get out of the way? What I tried to do when I led Movement of Youth was figure out how to create a space that's led by young people, for young people and by young people, recognizing that you all already have what it takes to be successful. And my goal is to figure out how to get you all the resources to do that. So it's really folks getting out of the way. And I think that's very difficult, recognizing that we've navigated a number of different types of trauma that might cause us to show up in a certain type of way. But we also have the responsibility to heal ourselves and seek out that healing in such a way that we recognize that helps us show up more authentically and fully for other people.
Thank you so much for that, Atreus. I will direct this question to you as well, Naya. How do you believe that you will help ensure that the next generation, maybe the generation after us, will be aware of Dr. King's legacy and the legacy of other civil rights leaders?
And I agree with a lot of the things that Atreus said. I think that with organizing the protests that happened last year and the year before that, it's not a lack of energy in the youth. It's not a lack of motivation. It's really about creating that space. Our generation and generations to come have the drive to be in the streets, to create legislation, to do the advocacy work that needs to be done. However, it's a need for space for young people to do this kind of work. I also think that we have a lot of silos within our community. So it's about networking and coming together so that we can connect as a community, as youth, and continue to build that generation of people. I think creating space, as Atreus was saying, is also about being able to see people that look like you doing the work as well. I think that's super important. When I think about the work that I'm doing, I always think that there's somebody that's watching me. Can't see them. I might not know. They might see this weeks later, or somebody might tell them about it, but there's somebody that needs to see that there's a girl that looks like them doing work that they want to do. I think growing up, especially in Chapel Hill, in my primary years, that's something that I lacked tremendously, whether that was in education, sports, just within the community. It's hard to see a mirror image of what you want to see if you're not exposed to those things, or if you don't have an opportunity to be in a space where you see that. I also was in Movement of Youth, and it was an incredible program, and it offered me incredible opportunities, especially to travel out of the country. So I think that, again, opportunities and exposure to things like that is what builds and motivates people to continue to do the work. A lot of youth don't know that they can do this work, especially for a living. I think something that I heard a lot was like, okay, well, that, you'd like to do that, but what's your career? What are you going to do? So we need to be able to tell people that this isn't just like a hobby or something that you do. This is work that people have dedicated their lives to, work that people have to continue to dedicate their lives to, and something that I hope to do as well. So as a community and as people, I think that we just have to continue to inspire other people and the youth coming up, give them that exposure that they need in order to see that this isn't just something that you do in your free time, or this isn't just something you do when you see something coming up in social media, or another person has been shot at the hands of the police. This work is ongoing, and that type of thing will mobilize the youth to come.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Naya. We will start the next video, which is another speech delivered by Martin Luther King Jr., which in 1967, which is titled, "What is Life's Blueprint?" And then we will ask a few more questions.
In your life's blueprint, be sure that you have that a principle of somebodyness. Secondly, in your life's blueprint, you must have as a basic principle the determination to achieve excellence in your various fields of endeavor. You're going to be deciding as the days and the years unfold what you will do in life, what your life's work will be. And once you discover what it will be, set out to do it and to do it well. And I say to you, my young friends, that doors are opening to each of you. Doors of opportunity are opening to each of you that were not open to your mothers and to your fathers. And the great challenge facing you is to be ready to enter these doors as they open. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the great essayist, said in a lecture back in 1871 that if a man can write a better book or preach a better sermon or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, even if he builds his house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to his door. That hadn't always been true, but it will become increasingly true. And so I would urge you to study hard, to burn the midnight oil. I would say to you, don't drop out of school, and I understand all of the sociological reasons why we often drop out of school. But I urge you, in spite of your economic plight, in spite of the situation that you are forced to live so often with intolerable conditions, stay in school. And when you discover what you're going to be in life, set out to do it as if God Almighty called you at this particular moment in history to do it. And just don't set out to do a good Negro job, but do a good job that anybody could do. Don't set out to be just a good Negro doctor, a good Negro lawyer, a good Negro school teacher, a good Negro preacher, a good Negro barber, a beautician, a good Negro skilled laborer. Or if you set out to do that, you have already flunked your matriculation exam for entrance into the University of Integration. Set out to do a good job and do that job so well that the living, the dead, or the unborn couldn't do it any better. Falls your lot to be a street sweeper. Sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Leontine Price sings before the Metropolitan Opera. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. If you can't be a pine on the top of the hill, be a scrub in the valley. But be the best little scrub on the side of the rill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or you fail. Be the best of whatever you are.
Thank you for those remarks. My next question for this part of the event is, how has Martin Luther King's Junior's speech impacted your career choices and social/ethical mentality? And I will start with Naya.
That's kind of tough. So I think that it kind of goes along with the quote that I talked about earlier about injustice anywhere. So I really aim to go into healthcare reform. This came about in a very interesting way for me. I didn't know where I was going in my career for a long time, just because there were so many things that I was passionate about. And there were so many different ways that I could do it. And that is still true. But I think that I really fell in love with what it meant to take care of Black women and how that was lacking in our communities. So I think I saw firsthand within my family, and then you can look at the statistics online to see that Black women have become the bottom of the barrel when it comes to healthcare, especially when it comes to Black women giving birth. So the last 4 years, I've been able to aim and kind of focus my studies within the maternal mortality of Black women and the legislation that's been going on in Washington, D.C. to try and get some type of barriers within hospitals that make it illegal or a form of malpractice when it comes to Black women dying during childbirth. So I think that really aligns with the idea of injustice everywhere, because a lot of people don't think of or they don't have the knowledge about the injustice when it comes to Black women, Black women giving birth or Black women in healthcare, especially if you haven't experienced it or you haven't read about it. So it might not be something that comes firsthand to people when they think about injustice, but the same way that people are experiencing that is going to affect people down the road. When people don't have parents that can take care of them, that's going to lead to lack of opportunity, or people don't have mothers that can provide them with assistance or just like nurture and development. That plays a major role down the road when it comes to the growth and development of children, especially Black children. So that is what I aim to do. And I think that connects with the idea of injustice everywhere. But I think it also connects to what Dr. King was just talking about, being the best at what you do. So I don't think it's always about the work that you do, but making sure that in the work that you do, you're doing the best that you can. So that's always what I aim to do if my career path changes, which it might. So just trying to do the best in that.
Thank you so much for that, Naya. Treyas, you can go next.
Sure. Well, I don't know to what extent, Dr. King has influenced my career path, but I could say we have had a similar pathway. And so what many folks may not know is that Dr. King actually didn't intend on being, he didn't intend on being a pastor or leading a movement in that way. It wasn't until his mentor, Dr. Benjamin Mays from Morehouse College, convinced him to do that. And so this notion of mentors, the people that you have in your life, they can really influence the pathway that you take. And so many folks know that mentoring has been essentially the thread that has run throughout my life, growing up and not having a best childhood. So navigating a lot of drug abuse from my mom's side and having to navigate various types of abuse. It wasn't until I was connected with a mentor that really helped me process through what it is I went through. And then that mentor and the experience that I had with him led me to start Movement of Youth, and then led me to do the work that I do now with Mentor North Carolina, connected to the National Mentoring Partnership. And so I'd say the people that you have in your life can certainly influence the pathway that you take. And so I think for me, there were various things that I wanted to do, but I think that so often life brings you what your calling might be. And I think that when it becomes apparent as to what that is, it's a matter of when do you answer that call? Because if you're doing something that is not in alignment with the ways in which you've been created to show up, you might make a lot of money, you might even be good at it, but there's going to be something that's missing on the inside. And I'd say for me, I've navigated some significant challenges doing the work that I do to this day, but I can say that I can wake up every single day knowing that I'm doing what it is that I was created to do, and that I receive fulfillment, recognizing that this is a pathway that has allowed me to actually
Hello, everyone. Hang tight. We are still in the session. I appreciate your patience. It appears we still have the event going. I think one of our computers froze that is hosting this. Atreus, hang tight 1 second and we will get this going. Okay, I think we can continue. Atreus, you still there? Atreus, are you still there? I think we're in good shape now. Okay. Kendall, are you available to speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
Awesome. Great. Okay. So, everyone, we apologize for that technical difficulty there. I think we are in good shape now. Didn't mean to have Atreus cut off there. Atreus, do you want to continue what you were saying? And if he is not available, Kendall, we will move on to our next guest speaker until we get him back.
Okay, great. I see Atreus. Can you hear me, Atreus?
Yeah, I've been here the whole time.
We like glitched out, so I couldn't see you. Do you want to continue with what you were saying before we glitched out and everything?
Oh, I don't know where I was.
It's okay. Okay, I will go on to the next question. So questions are more education based from what I'm looking at. So the first question I have is, how do you propose we close the achievement gap and properly educate students on the civil rights movement and the complicated history of racism in our own town? So I will start with Atreus.
All right. Well, welcome back. So, so I think this notion of closing the achievement gap, I don't think that it necessarily needs the onus doesn't need to be on students to do that. I think that we need to recognize the various ways in which Black and brown youth have essentially been put into a system that is not designed for them to be successful. So I think the way that we educate young people right now, there are some inherent conflicts. I think one of the things that I've had to struggle with, and so of course I mentioned my daughter, who's 9, and all students I think have struggled during COVID to remain connected and things of that nature. But there's a lot of research that talked about how there are a lot of Black students, Black and brown students, that when the notion of coming back to the classroom was introduced, there was a lot of anxiety because a lot of the microaggressions that they may have experienced when they were in-person settings didn't exist when they were doing virtual learning. And so many students were actually thriving. And so there's something about this larger system and how teachers might view Black and brown students that create some challenges. And so I think that instead of wanting to know how students can navigate this, I guess I'd ask the question, how do we train teachers? How do we train administrators? How do we train the folks that are quote unquote in charge, so to speak, to show up differently for Black and brown students, recognizing that there is an inherent genius that exists, but in many ways has been told to remain silent, or because it doesn't show up in a certain way, it's seen as disruptive or not fitting into a particular environment. So I think there has to be much more done at the systems level for folks that are in charge for them to show up differently. I'd say the second piece would be making sure that Black and brown students understand their history, but also that if they are experiencing a system in such a way that is disadvantaging them, it's not their fault. And I think that too often, and I say this about my experience when I was in college, but I'll say this, that if you're receiving messages every single day that you're not capable, that you don't belong in a space, there might be a way in which you internalize that and then begin to think that something's wrong with you. And so if you believe that you're wrong, then when you show up in a space, there's all these things that show up that may create a space in which you can't perform. I've shared a lot for folks that, I went to UNC undergrad and I nearly flunked out my first year. And I was there, had an academic scholarship, and really struggled with the microaggressions from white students that constantly sent the message that I didn't belong there. It'd be something as simple as me being there because of my academics and folks asking me, what sport do I play? So this notion that, the only reason I would be at UNC is because I'm an athlete. Or, being asked, what's the lyric to so-and-so's song? So this notion that I should automatically know the lyrics to whatever, quote unquote, Black song, or being in an all white, seminar, raising my hand and rarely getting called on, or just having some people flat out ask me, well, hey, I had a friend that went to Myers Park. It's an affluent, high school in Charlotte, and they didn't get into Carolina. How'd you get here? So I think there were all these messages that one would receive, and that had nothing to do with me. I was there because of my own merits, but there was this larger pressure that said, hey, you don't belong here. And so I think that, when I was able to connect with the Black student movement and other organizations that affirm our racial identity, I recognized that the problem wasn't me. It was the environment in which I was existing in. And I think too often, young folks may not understand that. And so having that level of awareness then helps you to push back against that and say, hey, I have every right to exist. And in many ways, existence is a form of activism, that just because I'm here, that is a way in which I can assert myself and really help to allow other folks that look like me to create that space as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Atreus. Naya, I'll let you go next.
I think that one of the things that Atreus said that really reminded me of my high school experience is creating those spaces where you were able to be around other students who look like you, especially when you're not enrolled in courses where it's heavily a larger population of African-American students, so like your AP and honors courses. And I remember I would have microaggression experiences, and then I would have to ask myself, like, was that intentional, or did she really mean that? I remember a big thing about like just being a Black girl in high school was the microaggressions about my hair was something that made me extremely insecure. And I had, in order to get over those things, it was for the grace of the Minority Student Achievement Network, being able to sit around other students who were experiencing those same things across the district, to affirm in myself that I wasn't tripping, I wasn't crazy. These were things that were intentional, that teachers were saying to me, that had some type of force behind them. I think also with the achievement gap, we have to address the root of the issue. It's not something that popped up last week. As many people started talking about the achievement gap in 2020 and had all these incredible solutions about how they could come in and fix it and tutor people. This isn't an issue that started in 2020. It was well before 2020. I have two siblings that graduated from Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools, and it was well before them as well. So this isn't an issue that just came up. And I think with also that it's important to know the legacy behind the people that have been trying to work with this issue. A lot of people try and come in and fix something, and they don't recognize the people in the community that have been advocating and doing this work for years. And I think whenever you go into a space, it's super important for you to acknowledge and also learn and listen to the people that have been trying to do things about this. Maybe you can learn something from them. Maybe they know something that they tried and it didn't work, and maybe you can work with them to figure out a different solution. But I think there's power in communicating with people that are fighting for the same things that you want to see as well. I think another super important thing when it comes to the achievement gap is the people that we have in our schools and what they're pouring into students, whether that's the teachers, the counselors. Everybody within the school system plays a role in the achievement gap. And so what they're telling students or what they're doing for the school plays a large role in that as well. And along those same lines, these equity teams and training. That's like one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to the achievement gap. We can't talk about equity teams and equity training when you don't have the people that make equity at the table. When you talk about equity training within a specific district in a community, you can't outsource people to come in and deal with that issue. It takes people in the community. It's a team effort. There's people here that know about the issue, as I stated earlier, and they've been doing this work. Those people deserve to have a seat at the table during this work as well. So I think those are some of the main things, but it's a big rooted issue. So it takes a lot of people.
Thank you so much for that, Naya. And my next question is, what are your dreams about the future of education? So I will direct this question to Naya first. So how do you feel, what are your dreams for the future of education in maybe Carrboro and Chapel Hill as you plan on coming back and bringing more of your work to this area?
I think a space for people to be their authentic selves is my biggest aspiration. I have a niece. She is 7 and she's in 2nd grade. So I always say that my aspiration is for her to have a better experience that I had. I always do this work because I know that there's somebody to come after me. But especially her, I hear the stories when she comes home. And she tells me somebody said her name wrong. It's like you have to enforce those things. Like, no, your name has a purpose. And somebody says your name wrong, you correct them in that moment. That was another big thing for me throughout school, is people pronouncing your name wrong, just letting it breeze by. No, your name has meaning. I know my mom gave me my name for a reason. So making people address you by what you're giving name. But that's just a small example of the hope that I see, is that we are able to create spaces where people that look like me can be their authentic selves within the education system. And that doesn't just mean like within the classroom, but I think in all aspects of education, whether that's advocating for themselves, being at the table, being at school board meetings, any space where it involves a student, they feel like they can be there and they can advocate for themselves. I think students can be the biggest advocates for themselves, but it's about us building a community for them to feel empowered to do that. So that's one of the aspirations that I have.
Thank you so much for that, Naya. I will direct this question to you as well, Trace. How do you feel? What is your dream for the future of education in maybe North Carolina or Orange County?
Yeah, that's a big question, because I think that at least, and I'm not that old, but in my journey, I think that a lot of what I've had to do is unlearn a lot of things that I found that were not true or were incomplete. And hoping that we get to a space that we have an educational system that can prioritize what it is we actually need to know to be decent human beings. And I think that prioritizing the truth about our history, I think, is critically important. So where we came from, and not from a lens of guilt or blame, but it is what it is, that this country was set up in a particular way to create specific outcomes that have not worked for everybody. So how can we confront that boldly to help people move forward and figure out what is their pathway? I'd say the second piece would be this notion of not crushing dreams. And what I mean by not crushing dreams is that there are countless stories. And I even, fortunately, I had a guidance counselor that didn't do this to me. But my guidance counselor thought, and he happened to be a white man who thought I was talented enough to apply and get into UNC. He didn't stop me from doing that. But there are countless stories of Black and brown students that say, hey, I want to be a doctor, or hey, I want to be a lawyer, and their dreams are crushed. And they're like, huh, really? You think you want to do that? Why don't you think about this pathway instead? And that lingering voice then creates these stories later on in life that says, well, hey, this person in authority didn't think I was good enough to do this thing. And then it creates imposter syndrome. And so you get into these positions, you're like, do I really deserve to be here? And I think that teachers and administrators and people in power, they can crush dreams. They also have the capacity to build those dreams up and to make sure that young people understand whatever it is they want to do, there's a pathway to get there. It's just a matter of surrounding yourself with people that will nurture those dreams and help you to figure out what are the steps to actually get there. And I think that too often, not say adults, they crush dreams, you know, I really try to lean into that as a parent, you know, with my daughter, that if she comes to me and she says she wants to, and I don't know, whatever that pathway might be, that I'm not the person that tells her that she can't do that. You know, I want to be that person that says, okay, if that's what you want to do, here are some steps, or this is a person you may want to meet to get there, and she can determine her own path. But I think too often our paths are self-directed, and parents may say, well, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And then you have a young person that knows deep in their heart, they don't want to be a scientist. But because their mom and dad were so excited about them doing that, they're slowly dying every single day doing this thing they know is not bringing them joy. And so if we can prioritize joy in schools and people pursuing whatever that joy is, and we don't shame whatever that pathway is, then I think we create pathways for people to be happy with the decisions they make.
Thank you so much for that, Atreus, and thank you guys all for your responses to these questions. I believe we do have time for questions from the audience. Before we do that, I do have a special guest I would like to introduce. His name is Fred Joyner. He is a poet and curator based in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. He is a 2019 Academy of American Poets Literate Fellow. He is the co-founder of the Center for Poetic Thoughts in Washington, D.C. He is a board member for the American Poetry Museum, a member of the Artist Advocacy Board for the Orange County Arts Commission, and a member of the Carborough's Poets Council. Fred, welcome.
Hello. Can you all hear me? Great. Thank you. Thank you all for having me. I wasn't sure what when I was gonna come on or what I was supposed to do, so I didn't. I was caught a little off guard. I'm sorry. I just wanted to. I had a few things I wanted to share. I was really inspired by the conversation. A few things that I wanted to say. First of all, I wanted to read two poems. I'm going to read two short poems. One by from this very important book. It's called Words of Protest, Words of Freedom. It's poetry from the Civil Rights Movement, from the period right before the Civil Rights Movement. It's a collection of poems that from a period that gets overlooked because the period after the Civil Rights Movement was the Black Power movement, the Black Arts movement. And so the period, you know, from Emmett Till's lynching to the Black Arts movement often gets overlooked in the art. And I think it's really important because all the things that you all have been talking about, like these speeches that Martin Luther King was making, all the movements, the student movements that were happening, there was poetry and art that was being created in parallel with all of that stuff that was making comments about this. So I wanted to do that. I'm going to do that. And then I wanted to share one other little clip of saying from one of, Atreus mentioned one of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's mentors. Well, one of his other mentors was a man named Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman wrote a book famously called Jesus and the Disinherited. And Martin Luther King traveled with that book because the ideas about liberation, the ideas about where Dr. King put his focus come from that book. So I'm going to share a few quick little poems. And then I wanted to share this one saying from another book it's by Howard Thurman. It's called The Mood of Christmas and Other Celebrations. It even though it has Christmas in the title, it's a piece that really infuses things that we should be thinking about year round. There's prayers in it, there's poems in it, there's these short little essays in it. So with that, I'm going to read this poem. This is called Martin Luther King. It's by Gwendolyn Brooks. Gwendolyn Brooks was one of the poet laureates of the United States, first Black woman to be the poet laureate of the United States. And so, yeah, Martin Luther King Jr. A man went forth with gifts. He was a prose poem. He was a tragic grace. He was a warm music. He tried to heal the vivid volcanoes. His ashes are reading the world. His dream still washes to anoint the barricades of faith and control. His word still burns the center of the sun above the thousands and the 100,000s. The word was justice. It was spoken. So shall it be spoken. So shall it be done. And so the next poem I'm going to read is a poem. So the other thing I think is important to remember about King is that even though his activism was happening here in the United States, this is a global thing. The things that King was doing, all these things were happening in a crucible of the world. You know, different nations in Africa were getting their independence and trying to be self-determining at this moment as well, and not just Africa, throughout the Caribbean. Movements of self-determination were happening, and so this next poem I'm going to read is by a poet named Nicholas Guillen, who is, I believe, a Puerto Rican poet, Afro-Puerto Rican poet. And so, and it was translated into English. And so just for us to always remember that when we are doing these things, when we are acting in the space for justice, we have allies around the world that are co-strugglers with us and are allies with us. And so this poem is called "What Color?" ? And there's an epigraph that opens by a poet who I'm not familiar with, but the poet's name is Yevgeny Yevtushenko, and it's on the assassination of Martin Luther King. His skin was so black, but with the purest soul, white as snow. Nicholas Guillen is addressing that quote in his poem. So the poem goes this way. Such a white soul, they say, that noble pastor had. His skin so black, they say, his skin so black in color, was on the inside snow, white, lily, fresh milk, cotton. Such innocence. There wasn't one stain on his impeccable interior. In short, a handsome find. The black whose soul was white, that curiosity. Still, it might be said another way. What a powerful black soul that gentlest of pastor had. What proud black passion burned in his open heart. What pure black thoughts were nourished in his fertile brain. What black love so colorlessly given. And why not? Why couldn't that heroic pastor have a soul that's black? A soul as black as coal. So that was Nicholas Guillen, and that was from this book. Please go and get this book. It's a really important book of poems. It'll be a blessing to your life during this time as we think about not a day off, but a day on, and how this day on propels us through the year and through our lives. Indeed. Last thing I want to share with you is from Dr. Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman was a theologian. He was a professor, the dean at Rankin Chapel, and a professor of theology at Howard University. And he ultimately went on. He was in Boston. He was at Morehouse College in Atlanta. He was all over the place. But he was called a mystic, and it was because he addressed religion. Even though he was a Christian, he addressed religion from a very ecumenical space. And I think we know this from King's writings and from other people who are around him. The ethos of what was in Dr. King's speeches will come from, Naya and Atreus were talking about lineages and legacies, and your questions, Kendall, were addressing that. Like, we have to be clear that our mentors, we're standing on those people's shoulders, and they're with us now. They are currently with us. We can address them, right? And we can address them through their work. And there's this one little quote that I think is akin to something that is attributed to King, is like, I think that's, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't have it in front of me, but that saying that says something like, you don't, if you haven't found something to live for, if you haven't found something you would die for, it's not worth living, right? And so there's an essay. I encourage you as well, go out and get this book. It's like $12. You can get it at Epilogue or better, even better. Epilogue, hit them up, Flyleaf, all of those. Or if you're not local, find a Black bookstore, support it. It's the first line of this essay, this short little essay, that it's called "Keep Alive the Dream in the Heart." And it says this: as long as a man has a dream in his heart, he cannot lose the significance of living. And I think that really encapsulates, and the essay is a beautiful essay. It's a beautiful lyric essay that goes on. It's very easy to read. Howard Thurman was famous for writing these small pieces that were easy to digest, but also easy to try to apply to your life. I think that saying, that little clip, that one sentence is, really captures something that I think can charge us all as we think about how we live, how we live the hope. Hope and love and justice. These things are not just nouns; they're verbs. They're action words. Like, those are things. So how do we take Dr. King's dream and actually, we in literary terms, it's called anthemera, how you verb a noun, right? So how do we make dream? How do we make dream and hope and love action words, right? And I think that the work that you all are doing is lending itself to that. And I'm thankful that you would all include me on this. I'll read the quote one more time. It's from an essay called "Keep Alive the Dream in the Heart." As long as a man has a dream in his heart, he cannot lose the significance of living. So I'll leave that with you. Howard Thurman and this collection, Words of Protest, Words of Freedom, Poetry of the American Civil Rights Movement. Thank you, and the struggle continues.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Joyner. We will now take questions from the audience. I don't see any yet, but I will wait a few minutes unless Jeremy has any for me already. So I will give you guys a few minutes to put them in the little Q&A box in the Zoom meeting. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kendall. We will monitor the side here and see if any folks have any questions and allow them to talk if they would like as well. Thanks. We have one comment right now that says, "Excellent, great job, Kendall, and our panelists." That's someone wrote that. We encourage folks right now, let us know if you have any questions for our panelists or Kendall while we have them here.
And I will also say, while we're waiting, that we are also recruiting for the NAACP Youth Council. Just do my little selfish plug here. So the NAACP Youth Council is recruiting at the moment for youth that are of ages. It is from middle school to, I believe, 21. I believe, yes. If I'm wrong, I will get back to you guys on that. So we are recruiting right now. It is only $10 for registration. So if you guys would like to join, please let me know. And yeah, so I will let you guys get your questions in.
I'm going to go ahead and coattail on that with Kendall and mention that this event was actually put on, as we said earlier, by all three youth groups. So we had the Youth Advisory Board and the Carrboro Youth Council that worked with Kendall and the Chapel Hill Carrboro NAACP, which means anyone can, you guys can also sign up for the Youth Council if you have any kids or youth that are interested. They work closely with the Recreation Department in Carrboro. And there's also the Youth Advisory Board, which Kendall is actually a member of, that helps advise the town in certain matters with the youth as well. We have some questions up here. Let's see. We have some questions from Damon. Kendall, can you speak a little bit about how young people can get involved in local action and whether it's related to racial equity or other issues that interest them?
Okay, so thank you so much for that, Mr. Damon. I will say that just getting involved in things like the NAACP Youth Council, I feel like I can't say that enough. Being a part of, I've said this in like all of my college applications, but being a part of the NAACP Youth Council has been a dream to me, just being able to get involved in things like social justice and ethics and things of that nature have helped me grow into the career choice that I want to go into and just grow a bigger voice in the way of social justice and things of that matter. So joining your local youth organizations like the Chapel Hill Carrboro NAACP Youth Council, the Youth Advisory Board for Carrboro, like Jeremy said, I'm already a part of that organization. You can see that my hand is in a bunch of things in Chapel Hill Carrboro. So that's another thing, just placing your hand wherever you need to and just making sure you have that seat at the table. So yeah, getting involved in those youth organizations, the Carrboro Youth Council. I know Chapel Hill also has a youth council. Getting involved in your school is another big thing. So when I was deciding what high school I wanted to go to, one of the sole reasons that I wanted to go to East Chapel Hill High School was because they had the Social Justice Academy that is led by one of my favorite teachers at East Chapel Hill High School, Mr. Brian Link. So I would say when you put intention behind your work in high school, so whether that means you becoming a part of the becoming a part of the student council, being another Nia Farrington, being the first Black person to be of one of these bigger executive roles in your school, or being a part of starting a Black student union or a Hispanic student union or any of those things. Just place your hand and make sure your opinions and your ideas, everything that you want for your school and everything you want for your life in this community is known. So yeah, it all just starts with you just putting your hand out and saying what you want to be a part of. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Kendall. Thanks for the question, Mayor Sales. So we have one more comment from Joel Brunn. I hope I'm pronouncing their name right. My apologies if not. Great job, Senator Foushee, panelists, and the youth. Anyone else have any questions for our panelists and Kendall? After that, if we don't, we've got another one. Awesome. What spaces, infrastructures, building networks do our town municipalities need to help provide for youth to be able to convene and get involved, lifting their voices, create, and build?
Okay, I will direct this question to Nia first.
I was hoping that wasn't coming to me first.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I think just a space in general for youth to center themselves. I know I don't live here now, so I live in DC. So I don't know what spaces are actively accessible, but I know at least when I was a student here and lived in Chapel Hill full time, it's super important to have a space where people can convene with like-minded people and organize. Even now with like doing work with the NAACP, just being able to go somewhere where you can be around other people that are interested and invested in doing the same work that you want to do can create a community within itself. So,
if I could, I would say I think that I want to address the question directly too, is spaces, infrastructure, buildings, and networks. So I read poems, right? I'm involved in the arts. I think that art spaces are important. Art spaces and creative spaces are important. Arts infrastructure is important. When you look at the movements as they were happening. Like you look at the Black Power movement, the Black Arts movement that created Black studies, that created Africana studies, or that created Black-led Africana studies and African studies programs. Those things were given fuel by the artist. And so, and I think it's important to have spaces for where creative thinking, it doesn't have to be art in the museum sense, although those things are important. Museums and museum spaces are important, but spaces where young people can engage their creative mind. That's why I'm a big proponent of arts integration education in the schools, right? It's not just math, it's not just science, it's not just, like the hard sciences, it's not all those things, but how does art integrate? And I'm not talking in a very cliche way in terms of STEAM, like STEAM is real, I get it, but I mean, really giving young people time and space to be creative. Like I'm very inspired and enlightened or hopeful for projects like Project 203, here in Carrboro, that's looking to build out the library, that's looking to build out a space that can be a community gathering place, because I think those are the kinds of places where it's a training ground for the activism and the advocacy that students can do for themselves, right? It starts to help them learn a language and to build networks everywhere. So I think stuff like that is important. Those spaces like that are important. Networks, I think letting students know that they're not alone, linking them up with other youth, like, I'm focused on the arts because I believe in the power of the arts to impact our social reality. I think that's important. I think it's important to be able to link up with other youth around the state and around the region, the Mid-Atlantic region, right? Because they're all dealing with similar types of things. And so those are the things that I think about. I think of art spaces, creative spaces. And in Carrboro, we're fortunate that we've got, they support festivals and things that feed the community. And I think I'm hopeful that we're going to do more of that in creating spaces that will make room for some of that creative thinking to happen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joyner. Do you have anything you would like to add to this, Atreus?
I was going to yield to the Orange County residents. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll add a little thing to this. So I had the opportunity, like I said, to be a part of Movement of Youth. And I feel like that was a great way for me to get into myself when it comes to my confidence and my ideals on racial justice and social justice in general, and also being able to collaborate with college students and mentors who could help me build what I wanted to do for college. And just seeing, especially like as a student who would work with the UNC kids, I was able to see Black and Brown UNC students when I normally just walking around Franklin Street or just my day-to-day basis when I go to work. A majority of the time, all I see is white students at UNC. So just knowing that they're there helps ease me when it comes to what I could walk into a predominantly white institution. So being a part of organizations like Movement of Youth, and I was also able to be a part of a smaller organization. It was the Teen Center that is on Franklin Street. I don't know if they're still running it, but I was able to do that in, I believe, middle school. And it was just a great way for me to, again, just get into myself and make friends with people who didn't go to the same school as me. So just building those spaces to just talk to other people who are of my age, and then also just being able to get to know other people and learn their struggles and things of that matter. And then also to direct this question away to how our Chapel Hill Carrboro City School System can help students of color, or just students in general, in this area of our world. I'll go specifically to students of color. It's just adding teachers of color or faculty members of color to our schools, because I've said this more times than I can count, but just adding those people of color to our schools just helps us just to know the fact that we are not alone and that we are not the only people in these spaces, and then there are people that we can look up to. I think Naya mentioned this, just talking about seeing people's faces and the things that we want to do. You could be helping a teacher or a kid of like a Black boy who wants to be a coach, you could see if you have a Black male coach who's just helping lead a team, you can see, oh, maybe I can do that as well. Or just seeing those people who are just getting involved in all these things, and that does something psychologically to a person, a younger person, just letting them know that they can also be a part of these organizations or do these professions. So yeah, just keeping our Black and brown teachers in schools is a big part of just getting us involved and helping us open up to this county and just opening up to this town. So yeah. And I believe we have one more question. I think I see one, or yes. So I think it's a thank you. So it says, thank you for all the work you do in this community. With God as our leader, we continue to stand for justice with motivation and determination. Let us continue to pray for this nation and for each of us. May we not see our work, may we not see our works, but someone will. I love you all. Thank you so much for that, Mrs. Bryant. So if you have anything else for me, Jeremy, I do not see any more questions, I don't believe.
Looks like those were the questions we have. Kendall, I appreciate it.
Amazing. So I will do my closing remarks. I again want to wish everyone a sincere thank you to our guest panelists and Mr. Joyner for giving us those amazing poems. Thank you all for joining us for this reflection and celebration on Dr. King's legacy. I'd like to acknowledge the work that the Youth Council has done, the Carrboro Youth Advisory Board, the Carrboro Youth Council, and the Chapel Hill Carrboro NAACP Youth Council has done to put this event together. I know we had a big transition when it comes to COVID and all, but we still made it through and we had an amazing event, as you can see. So yeah, we hope that you leave with a renewed commitment to doing the continued work of Dr. King. On behalf of all of us, thank you so much for joining today in honor of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I believe we'll be ending this with a video from the Stanford Choir playing, Stanford Choir singing Lift Every Voice and Sing. So.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with liberty. Let all rejoicing rise high as the listening sky. Let it resound loud as the lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let all rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughter. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our star is out. God of our weary ears, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we praise. Oh, that's the peace, oh, God, where we drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you everyone for being here. Y'all have a great rest of your days and keep fighting the good fight and getting some good trouble.